Hi everyone, welcome to the channel and I hope you're all having a great day. Now before we start, I just want to give everyone a heads up. Now as you know, the Killzone servers was shut off by Sony a long time ago. But luckily, some brave souls have brought back both Killzone 2 and Killzone Mercenary. They're both back online right now. I'll leave the links to the videos in the description at the bottom. You know, if anyone's interested, that is. Now, on to today's topic. Helldivers 2 has been a boom for both Arrowhead Studios and Sony's live service ventures thus far. When this game was first revealed, most gamers were put off by the gameplay change from the 3/4 overhead view of the first game. Now despite the risk, the end result was pretty positive in terms of revenue, player count, and player retention. Now, with most games these days, live service ones included, come the inclusions of microtransactions. In Helldivers 2's case, these come in the form of war bonds and the superstore. Some of them were a hit, others were a miss, but the one superstore item that sparked interest as of late would be the Killzone set. Now while this was nice, this would have served much better as being a war bond. Putting it in the superstore comes off as greedy. But that's a personal opinion, and also, that's an issue for another video. More to the point, the Killzone franchise fan base has taken notice and has sparked renewed interest in wanting the series to be revived. Killzone was initially meant to be one of Sony's staple franchises. However, sadly that wasn't the case once all was said and done. Let's start at the beginning. The original Killzone released on November of 2004. The game showed big ambitions that weren't really able to be realized on the PlayStation 2's hardware. In other words, it simply wasn't powerful enough, which the developers themselves had spoke on. Another problem was that it came off the heels of Xbox's Halo, which was another problem in itself. But regardless, the game franchise did show promise. But in order for that franchise to realize the potential it could have, Guerrilla Games needed more juice. Hence we entered the era of the PlayStation 3. When Killzone 2 released for the PlayStation 3 back in February of 2009, Sony was looking for a first-person shooter mainstay. Resistance 1 and 2 were both out at that time, and they did garner a fan base, but it wasn't exactly the splash that Sony was searching for. So, they put all their hopes in the Killzone 2. The graphics were top of the line at that time, as was the sound. The multiplayer was unique and fun, and the Hellgas, they were a compelling enemy. However, at the time, Call of Duty was on the road to becoming a juggernaut, and direct comparisons were abound. There were some persistent complaints, such as the game's guns were too heavy, the game doesn't have enough color, the game isn't like Call of Duty, and there were a few others. Now these complaints plagued Killzone 2 from day one. Despite that, the game did garner a good fan base, but it wasn't exactly the mega hit that Sony wanted. But they were willing to give it another shot with Killzone 3. Now, with Killzone 3, there's a cautionary tale here. Guerrilla Games listened to all the critique made about Killzone 2 when they were making this one. The game looks too bland and lifeless, they said. So, they added more varied terrain and biomes. The game weapons feel too heavy and sluggish, they said. So, they adjusted the speed and gave the weapons a lighter feel. The game isn't like Call of Duty, they said. So, they made the gameplay more in line with what Call of Duty is, complete with perks and all. What was the result, you ask? Nothing but confusion. The game didn't grow the initial base that it had by gaining new players, and the base that it already had, it was pretty much displaced. In the end, this culminated in a new critique being made. We miss Killzone 2. Okay, Now put yourself in the shoes of a Guerrilla Games developer that worked on this franchise. You start a new franchise and build a foundation with the original Killzone game. You build upon that with the power of a new system, being the PS3, with top-of-the-line graphics and gameplay for the time with Killzone 2. Not to mention nobody had multiplayer remotely similar for that time as well. Then people nitpick your product to the high heavens with critiques such as, there's not enough color, or the game feels too heavy. Not to mention it's constantly being compared to the it game at the time, Call of Duty. You take in what your so-called audience says and give them what they want with Killzone 3. And in doing so, address the perceived knocks that they had on the second game. Then ultimately, after all of that, the knock on Killzone 3 becomes, we miss Killzone 2. Now I can't imagine how infuriating this would be if I was one of these developers. But this goes back to the cautionary tale I mentioned earlier. The customer is not always right. They were given what they asked for and ended up liking what was already there. Now, by the time Killzone Shadowfall was released on the PlayStation 4, for the most part the series had lost its way. New ideas were tried, and the multiplayer, it was good, but it didn't really stack up to what was considered the series' peak, Killzone 2. But who's to blame for that? The developers or the fan base? Normally, I don't have a habit of blaming the fan base, but in this case, in my opinion, and for this particular moment, the demise of the franchise is really because of the fans. Guerrilla Games tried to appease the fan base that in the end, proved to be uncertain of what they actually wanted, and in giving them what they supposedly asked for, it proved to be a bane rather than a boon for the franchise and Sony as a whole. If Killzone was ever to return, the fans will need a clear understanding of what they want. Don't ask Killzone to be Call of Duty. That needs to stop. If gamers want that, there's a game out there already. It's called Call of Duty. Go and play that. Let Killzone be Killzone. Let the franchise stand and grow on Guerrilla's own ideas. No more whining about it not being like other games. I wouldn't want it to be like other games. And honestly, no one should want that. Most first-person shooter games are cookie cutter as it is. So appreciate things when they're outside of the box. Personally, I myself would love to have a return to the series. And I'm not just saying that. Look at my PlayStation Network profile as proof. I've earned the platinum on most of the series I've played, with the exception of Shadowfall, and that's really because I'm stuck. Sadly, I've yet to play the PlayStation Network version of Liberation, although I do actually have it downloaded, and I'll get to it at some point. I even have most of the physical versions of the series, except for the PlayStation Portable game Killzone Liberation. And that's mainly because I never had a PlayStation Portable. I was still a student at that time, and money was pretty tight. I'm pretty sure a good portion of you know what I'm talking about there. Anyway, the point that I'm making is that I'm not one of these people that only say they're a fan just for the sake of saying it on the internet. I truly am. And if we really want Killzone to return, we have to really make Sony aware of that. You know, maybe a remaster of the older games is in order to test the waters and gauge fan interest. But if, that's a big if, by some chance they do remaster or remake the series, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. Because often fans of old franchises, you know, they clamor for these returns, and then when they actually happen, the fans don't show up. Remember, talking with your words means nothing. Talking with your wallet means everything.